welcome back. Now let's discuss trade now for the country, and we're looking at mobilizing Africa's private sector for AfCFTA. AfCFTA, of course, is a very common acronym now, word becoming a phrase, I guess. And this time we're looking at it from the perspective of the new Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD. They've gotten interested in this as other parts of the continent, and so they're holding an event beginning from tomorrow to look at how to actually mobilize these resources to help boost trade or increase trade. But the good news is already we have data telling us that there's been an increase in intra-African trade. Of course, that's exciting, because it used to be that a lot of trade is outside, inter. So we have some numbers now that last year, 2024, trade reached $220.3 billion. That shows an increase of 12.4% from 2023. And a lot of this has been attributed to the talks and the actions around AfCFTA. Also, intra-continental trade stood at $192 billion, representing 15% of Africa's total trade. Nigeria, big brother, leading trader there with $18.4 billion, followed by South Africa and Morocco. And of course, AfCFTA has 54 out of 55 African member unions signed an agreement. 49 countries have ratified, and we hear a lot of talks. But let's go away from the talks and make it work. I guess that's what NEPAD will want to do now. We have one of the organizers of that is the founder and chief executive officer of WVL Development Advisors, and is a former managing director of the Bank of Industry. So, of course, we expect a lot of hands-on conversation this morning. Dr. Wahid Olagunju, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, with your background at the Bank of Industry, dealing with funds, getting funds, and also using the funds effectively for businesses, and now you're also involved in getting trade, which is at the heart of the funds anyways. Do you agree, though, that the perspective has changed or is changing, talking about relationship within the African countries and a boost to intra-African trade?
Yes, progress is being made, but certainly we are not where we ought to be. You mentioned 15% intra-African trade, which is the least in the world amongst all the continents, right? Other continents are doing 50-60%. So our target is to triple that number, right, for perhaps the next 10 years or so that we can hit the region of 30 to 45% of intra-African trade. Let me give you the background. The AfCFTA is one of the components of the new Partnership for Africa's Development that was adopted in 2001 by the African Union. And NEPAD is supposed to drive Africa's development over a 50-year period, 2013 to 2063. The African Union came up with the Agenda 2063, which is supposed to be adopted by all African countries. And that 50-year program is divided into 10 decades of action each, right? You're looking at 5 decades of action over a period of 50 years. And now the objective is to ensure that we also increase our GDP on the African continent, which is cumulatively estimated at about 3.4 trillion. Try and double that number, perhaps looking at 8 trillion by 2043. No projections have been given yet for 2063, but then to be most desirable, if we can hit 10 trillion by 2063, compared with other parts of the world with comparable population. Like at the last UNGER in New York, an internationally renowned professor of development economics, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, drew parallels between Africa with a population of 1.4 billion, China with the same figure, and then India with almost the same figure. But if you now look at their combined GDP, China is talking about $18 trillion with a population of 1.4. India is talking about is doing about 13 trillion with a population of 1.4. Africa is doing 3.4 trillion with a population of 1.4. So we have challenges ahead of us, and there's correlation between the GDP and, of course, the per capita income and then the living standards. So if we want to increase the living standard of Africans and reduce poverty or eradicate poverty, we definitely need to redouble our efforts in the area of economic development. And that's why the private sector comes in. Governments provide the framework, as the African Union did. You know, NEPAD, they have what they call the African Union Development Agency, which is implementing arm of NEPAD. So in all African countries, this has been domesticated. So that was why the NEPAD Business Group Nigeria was established in 2004. There were about 25 founding directors at that time that included Alhaji Babanga Tukur, Alhaji Aliko Dangote, the present chairman of NEPAD Nigeria, Bashoro J.K. Randall, and the former Minister of Industry, Chief Mrs. Nike Akonde, and Mrs. Neola Fadayomi, and Erelo of Lagos, Mrs. Abiola Fernandez. There are many of them, including Chief Ibru, and then Mr. Christopher Eze. So they all came together and they registered and incorporated the NEPAD Business Group Nigeria. And we're trying to ensure that the NEPAD program is domesticated in Nigeria, trying to empower the private sector. Because really, governments provide the framework, the constitution, the laws, the policies, and the regulations. But they are meant to create the enabling environment. But it's left for the entrepreneurs who make up the private sector to make sure that those policies are implemented in their favor and take advantage of those policies. I'll give you an example. Some decades ago, Nigeria used to be a net importer of cement. But by 2002, the government at that time came up with the cement policy. And Alhaji Aliko Dangote, Abdulsamad Rabiu, and some other people took advantage of that policy. They were part of the implementation, formulation though. Chief Jamudu was the Minister for Industry at that time. And over a period of 10 years, Nigeria became a net exporter of cement. We become self-sufficient in cement. Same thing with telecoms. If not for the deregulation of the telecom sector, that also happened at that time, we will not be where we are today. But it took the government to come up with the deregulation of the telecom sector. And that's able to catalyze billions of dollars of investment to that sector today. In fact, Nigeria's telecom sector is the fastest growing sector in the world. We are not celebrating that. It's only the bad news that the international media celebrate, but we're able to do that because of the population. So we have a lot of comparative advantages too, because of the market size. 230 million is a huge market. Nigeria is one of the 10 countries in the world with population above 200 million. So that's why we can do a lot of things. Look at the Dangote refinery that was approved by the federal government, but he had to work with the federal government, not only federal government, but also the state government in having that project implemented. So that shows that national and subnational governments have important roles to play in supporting the private sector and enabling the environment. So that's why at the forum we're having tomorrow, we'll be having speakers from the private sector, from the government, subnational and national governments, international development community, the academia, and business membership organizations. So the idea is that we need to mobilize the private sector.
When you say mobilize the private sector, what exactly do you mean?
First, starting with information. You don't do business in the dark. Our entrepreneurs need to know the opportunities that are available, not only in Nigeria, but also on the African continent. We need to let them know that the market available to them is not just 230 million Nigerians, but the whole of African continent is now available to African entrepreneurs who can produce at scale. And that was what Professor Jeffrey Sachs was saying. For you to produce at scale, you need a big market. That's what the Chinese and the Indians are able to do because of the huge population. And thereafter is the largest free traded area in the world by size and number of countries. So those are the kind of opportunities we need to let our people be aware of. It can also work the other way around. Because if we don't get our act together in Nigeria, it means that investors could go to our neighboring countries and target the Nigerian market. And that could work against us if we don't get our act together. So that's why it's important for us to mobilize the private sector in Nigeria to make sure that we're able to produce competitively and operate competitively, and also our government officials. But
there are also Dr. Lagiju, hurdles of this interplay, inter-border trade. a lot of them. Travel costs, bureaucracy. It almost seems like we see ourselves more as competition and not collaborators on the continent.
Well, that's where the governments come in. And that's what they are trying to do at the African Union level, to remove all those barriers. For example, in ECOWAS, right, you have the free trade arrangement in ECOWAS, the trade liberalization initiative in ECOWAS. So governments are doing quite a lot. But around June or so, on the eve of the AfCFTA summit, there was a West African Economic Conference. And we saw what happened between Nigeria and Benin Republic. The two government officials came together. That initiative was led by Nigeria's Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Jumoke Odowale, and then, of course, the Minister of State and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. They all worked hand in hand with their Beninois counterparts to ensure that all these obstacles are removed, to ensure that the businesses between the two countries run smoothly without those hindrances. Of course, that's not mean that there may not be competition. We heard recently when one of the richest men in the world, Nigerian, Mr. Bayo Ogulesi, who says one of his companies operates ports in Benin Republic and Togo, but not in Nigeria. What are they doing right in those two countries that we also need to fix in Nigeria? So he's in talks with the current government to ensure that some of the obstacles you talked about are removed to catalyze investments to Nigeria. Gladly, somebody like Alhaji Aliko Dangote, for coming up with that kind of investment, it shows $20 billion in the Lekki Free Trade Area. It shows that Nigerians have confidence in the Nigerian economy. Samad Rabi is also doing the same thing, right? Somewhere in the South, people like Tony Limelu and co. These are Nigerians who are investing in Nigeria. If you don't invest in your countries, foreigners will not come and invest in your countries. When you are investing, the foreigners will, you know that market, let's go in there and support. And we need to have such investments repeated all over the country in different sectors, right? For us to be able to create jobs, for us to be able to ensure that living standards of our people are enhanced. And of course, we're also working on human capital development to ensure that our youth have the right skill set to enable them work in all those places. I mean, during the construction of, for example, the Beshe cement plant, when we went around with Alhaji Aliko Dangote, he told us that he had to import welders from some countries in Asia. Whereas if there was connection between the additional system and the private sector, they would have been told that, look, train so and so number of technicians for us to use. So that's why there is need for connection between the town and gown. You know.
So these are the conversations I believe that you're going to start off at the event
tomorrow. Certainly, yes. Certainly, yes.
But beyond the talks, are there plans to take it up, follow up? You know.
Exactly. The last session tomorrow is on implementation of our recommendations, because we realize that a lot of fora take place and the recommendations don't get implemented. So tomorrow's session on implementation will be led by Dr. Mrs. Deria Oshika, who is a retired federal permanent secretary, who has seen it all, right? She implemented the National Program on Immunization, and then she ended up becoming permanent secretary in the Ministry of Power, and then chairman of Access Bank, right? And she has a lot of dealings with the international development community as well. And she's also an industrialist in her own right. She produces a travelers fleet somewhere along Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. So she has seen it all. So she will be able to guide that session on how to get things implemented by national governments, subnational governments, working with international development partners, and then putting in place a proper mechanism for monitoring and evaluation, because we need to get that done. So wherever we recommendations come up with tomorrow, we're also setting up mechanisms to ensure that we follow up, and then we'll make those recommendations available to national and subnational governments, and then see how our development partners can also work hand in hand with us. So many of them are coming in tomorrow, like the African Finance Corporation, right? The African Development Bank, the AfCFTA, many of them are in the loop, and we're trying to ensure that we work hand in hand with them.
All right, so sounds exciting, and we certainly look forward to the aftermath of the talks, as you said there. Thank you so much for your time. Founder and Chief Executive Officer of WVL Development Advisors, also former Managing Director of the Bank of Industry, Dr. Waheed Olagunju, and we wish you the best.
Thank you very much. Hope we'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, we'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Thank you.
All right, let's take a break now. When we come back, state of the states. A lot of states are feeling very proud at this time, but not some. We'll talk about it after the break. Please stay with us.